Franklin Delano Roosevelt, often called FDR, was born on January 30th, 1882, in Hyde Park, New York, into a wealthy and well-known family. From the outside, it looked like he had everything: a big house, servants, private tutors, and all the comfort money could buy. His parents adored him and gave him opportunities that most children could only dream of. But if you look closer, his story is not just about privilege. It is about how a man who seemed to have an easy path was suddenly hit by disaster, broken, and then rebuilt himself to become one of the most important leaders in modern history. As a child, Franklin was shy but observant. He spent a lot of time outdoors, walking in the fields and forests around his family's estate, learning to love nature. His mother was very protective, and he did not grow up surrounded by crowds of other kids. Instead, he read books, rode horses, and listened to adults talking about politics and business. His distant relative, Theodore Roosevelt, became president when Franklin was a teenager, and this made a deep impression on him. The idea formed in his mind. Maybe one day he, too, could serve his country at the highest level. Roosevelt went to some of the best schools in America. He studied at Groton, an elite boarding school, and later at Harvard University. At Groton, he heard constant messages about duty, service, and the responsibility of the rich to help the poor. At Harvard, he learned more about history, government, and leadership. He was not always the top student, but he worked steadily and built confidence. He joined clubs, edited the student newspaper, and practiced speaking in public. On the outside, it looked like a classic success story: rich boy, good schools, big dreams. Most people would assume his road to power would be smooth and easy. After Harvard, Franklin studied law and began a career in public service. He married Eleanor Roosevelt, who was intelligent, serious, and deeply concerned about social issues. Together, they formed a partnership that would shape both their lives and American politics. Franklin entered politics as a young state senator in New York and later became Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He was ambitious and energetic, traveling, giving speeches, and building connections. In 1920, he ran for Vice President of the United States as the Democratic Party's candidate. The ticket lost the election, and his first big step toward the White House failed. It was a disappointment, but he still had his health, his wealth, and his future. At least that's what he thought. Just 1 year later, in 1921, disaster struck. While on vacation, Franklin Roosevelt became very ill. He developed a high fever, weakness, and pain. Soon, he could no longer move his legs. Doctors eventually told him he had been paralyzed by polio, a disease that attacks the nervous system. For a man who loved to hike, swim, and sail, the diagnosis was devastating. He was only 39 years old, with a wife, children, and a promising career. Overnight, he went from a strong, active politician to a man who could not stand or walk without help. In the beginning, Franklin went through a deep emotional crisis. He tried different treatments and hope-filled therapies, refusing to accept that he would never walk normally again. He spent long periods at Warm Springs, Georgia, a place with warm mineral waters, where he believed exercise and swimming might help his legs. The physical improvement was limited. Something more important happened there. He began to accept his condition and to rebuild his spirit. He met many other patients, often poor and unknown, who were struggling with the same disease. For the first time, he saw suffering not from a distance, but from the inside. Polio changed Roosevelt's understanding of life. Before, he had been a confident, sometimes privileged man who expected success. After polio, he tasted fear, helplessness, and helpless waiting. He now knew what it felt like to be vulnerable. This experience softened him and deepened his empathy. He learned how to smile even when he was in pain, how to joke with others to make them feel better, and how to keep going despite limitations. His body was weaker, but his character was becoming stronger. Slowly, he decided that his story was not over. Wheelchair or not, he would return to public life. Many people, including some of his own friends, believed his political career was finished. They thought voters would not accept a leader who could not walk, but Roosevelt refused to accept that idea. With the help of steel braces on his legs and a cane, and by leaning on the arm of his son or an aide, he trained himself to stand and take a few careful, supported steps for public appearances. Behind the scenes, he used a wheelchair, but in public, he usually appeared standing at a podium or walking with assistants. It was not about hiding the truth. It was about proving that his mind and will were still fully alive in the late 1920s. Franklin Roosevelt returned to politics in a big way. He ran for governor of New York and won. As governor, he faced serious problems: poverty, unemployment, and social unrest. Especially after the stock market crash of 1929, the crash triggered the Great Depression. A massive economic crisis that spread across the United States and the world. Factories closed, banks failed, and millions of people lost their jobs and savings. Instead of looking away, Roosevelt tried new programs to help jobless workers and struggling families in his state. He experimented with public works, social support, and reforms, building a reputation as an active, caring leader. By 1932, the whole country was desperate for change. The sitting president, Herbert Hoover, was widely blamed for not doing enough to fight the Depression. Franklin Roosevelt was chosen as the Democratic candidate for president. During the campaign, he traveled across the country, speaking about a new deal for the American people. He promised bold action, not timid waiting. He spoke with warmth and optimism, saying that things could improve if people worked together and if government took responsibility. His famous, cheerful confidence gave hope to frightened citizens who were standing in bread lines and searching for work. Roosevelt won the election in a landslide and became the 32nd president of the United States in March 1933 when he took office. The country was in a terrible state. Banks were failing so fast that many states had already declared bank holidays to prevent panic. In his first days as president, Roosevelt closed all banks temporarily, had experts inspect them, and then reopened only the healthy ones. To calm the nation, he began a series of fireside chats on radio, speaking directly into people's homes in a friendly, reassuring voice. He explained what was happening and what the government was doing. Ordinary citizens felt as if he was sitting in their living rooms, talking just to them. Under his leadership, the government launched the New Deal, a series of programs and reforms designed to provide relief, recovery, and reform. Public works projects built roads, bridges, dams, and parks, giving jobs to millions of unemployed workers. New rules were created for banks and the stock market to prevent future crashes. Social Security laws were introduced to give older people, widows, and disabled citizens a basic safety net. For many people, Roosevelt's actions meant food on the table, a chance to work, and a reason to hope again. Critics complained about government spending and expansion, but supporters saw the New Deal as a lifeline in a time of desperation, while America was struggling with the Depression. Dark clouds were gathering overseas. In Europe and Asia, aggressive dictatorships were rising, and war was on the horizon. When World War II finally broke out, Roosevelt had to guide his country through another crisis. At first, the United States stayed officially neutral, but Roosevelt believed that the spread of dictatorship was a serious danger. He worked to support allied nations with supplies while preparing his own country for possible conflict. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the United States entered the war. Roosevelt now carried an almost unimaginable weight, leading a nation at war across multiple continents. Despite his failing health and continuous pain, Roosevelt worked long hours, meeting generals, advisors, and foreign leaders. He helped shape overall strategy with Winston Churchill and other Allied leaders, planning not just battles, but also the future world order after the war. At conferences and meetings, he sat in his wheelchair or chair, smiling and speaking firmly, hiding as much of his exhaustion as he could. His body, once struck by polio, now sat at the center of the world's greatest conflict, guiding millions through radio speeches and decisions that affected the entire planet. Franklin Roosevelt was elected president 4 times, more than any other American leader. He served from 1933 until his death in 1945. During these years, he saw his country move from economic collapse to recovery, and from isolation to a leading role in the defeat of Nazi Germany and its allies. He did not see the end of the war himself. He died in April 1945, just months before victory in Europe. His passing shocked the world, but his influence did not disappear. The institutions, programs, and alliances he helped create continued shaping global politics and the American social system for decades. When we look at Franklin D. Roosevelt's life, it is easy to focus on the wealth he was born with. But the true riches in his story do not come from his family's money. They come from what he built after he was broken. His polio attack could have ended his public life and left him bitter and defeated. Instead, it humbled him, deepened his empathy, and forced him to grow in ways he never expected. It turned a confident young aristocrat into a mature leader who could understand suffering and speak to millions who had lost almost everything. For your viewers, Roosevelt's journey carries powerful lessons. First, success is not guaranteed by an easy start. You can be born rich and still fail, or be hit by tragedy that knocks you down. Second, illness, disability, or failure do not have to end your dreams. They can reshape them. Polio took Roosevelt's ability to walk, but it did not take his ability to lead. Third, true leadership is not about perfection. It is about standing firm in storms, admitting fear, but acting anyway, and using power to serve those who are weakest. In the end, Franklin D. Roosevelt's greatest riches were not his estates or his title, but his resilience, his courage in crisis, and his refusal to let personal suffering stop him from helping millions of others.